There we go. We are live. Hello, hello. As always, I have to triple, quadruple check to make sure everything's working because I also did change my, um, and of course it's dead. I changed the settings on my audio, so we're gonna check. But if you are here joining me, making sure everything's working, whether it is on YouTube over on TikTok, hello, welcome. Glad to have you here. I have a topic in mind, but it is very loosely a topic because what I'm trying to do is just show up and answer questions and be present as I'm talking about and helping people with the whole language learning thing. So there might be a little bit of lag because I had to do it on my computer because my tablet is messed up. Or not messed up, it's dead. It's just dead. Um, well, let's see if it's working and then I will exit out. Perfect. It's working. We're good. All right. So, like I said, this is not really a planned thing. Sometimes when I've done lives, I've had like a whole outline of like bullet point things I wanted to talk about. Sometimes I've done them where I'm like, let's co-work together. And now I am just trying to get more, I won't say comfortable because it's not that I'm uncomfortable showing up live, right? But I think get more comfortable with not having to pre-plan everything, especially in this context. I want to kind of go with the flow and invite more people to join me here in this space. So, for those of you that don't know me, let's start off there. My name is Bront'e. I am a language coach, an introvert language coach, which means that I help language learners learn languages. That's like the bare bones of it. My focus is helping learners who are like studying, focusing on multiple languages, go from frustrated to fluent in multiple languages. I was saying studying and focusing at the same time, and it just came out as noises, which, will happen when words are not working. So if you can hear me okay over on YouTube, hear me okay over on TikTok, please let me know. And like I said, there's no set plan to this other than I just want to talk about the things. And I did have the topic of diving into fast progress. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot in my own studies again lately, because it's not something that like I'm thinking about for the first time. I've been learning languages since 2008. So it's not like a first time conversation or discussion for me, but it's something I've been thinking about lately for some of my own languages, something I've been thinking about because of conversations I've been seeing online, and also with my members who I work really hard to like reinforce the amazing work that they're doing, right? One of the biggest reasons why we feel like we're not making progress is because we don't see it. And sometimes you are making progress, and it might be fast progress or maybe a lot of things that you're doing, but it's hard to see it because your eyes are not, or your like mind is not in tune to it. Sometimes it's because it doesn't feel like real progress. Like there's a lot of different reasons. And then there's like all of this pressure from external things, right? From watching other learners online, and maybe there's people who speak multiple languages in your community, and you feel this pressure to go fast, go quickly. It doesn't help that, um, although I feel like it's a lot less now in some ways, it doesn't help that there's still a big push for like learn a language in 30 days, like that whole theme, which, is a whole other conversation or a whole other like segment of what we can talk about. And so to start, I just want to say that while I do want faster progress, even in my own language studies, and a lot of the people I work with do want faster progress, I think we focus so much on making fast progress that we forget that you have to maintain the progress. So many people get up to the mountain really quickly and then don't even know how to get back down, or like don't know how to stay there. Like wherever your next destination is, like you don't know how to get there and you're stuck. Right. And so a lot of people who are learning languages are like, I want to get to a place as quickly as possible where I can use this language with my coworkers. Right. They get to that mountain peak. They're using it with their coworkers, maybe in a very specific situation. Maybe they're traveling and they're like, I'm done. I don't have to study anything anymore. And most of the time, like that's just what ends up happening. Um, Let me fix this over here. I got distracted by a notification, just got over on TikTok. So let me change this. Um, Effects. I got to scroll through all of my photos to find. Give me one moment while I do this search. Because I'm like, if I try to multitask and talk while I'm searching at the same time, I'm going to be saying random things and it's not going to make much sense. Um, but yeah, so I want to talk about fast progress, how to make faster progress, how to keep that progress going, but also how to be okay with going at your own pace and going slowly because it's not just about getting to that milestone or reaching that goal, but it's about staying there and maintaining it. Um, and I think that not many people remember that as we're continuing to go through the whole process of learning languages. We get so caught up in matching someone else's pace and, trying to, again, the whole learning language in 30 days, get fluent in 30 days. Like 30 days is the trigger, is the like catch all phrase for this kind of thing. And I feel like we get so caught up in trying to reach that we're not even paying attention to the progress that we're making. We're not paying attention to the growth that we're experiencing, to the wins that we're having, or the things that we learn and discover about ourselves and our progress. We get so caught up in all of that we miss it. And then we're like, I guess I'm not learning. I guess I'm not making progress. I guess nothing is working. Maybe I should just quit. Maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe, I should never learn languages ever. You get into that headspace that isn't good or productive for us and goes against like what you want for yourself in your language studies. Like you decided to go on this journey for a very specific reason. And I truly believe in not giving up on that. You might have to have a different strategy, a different structure to it. You might have to rethink like the time that you're spending on it or the energy that you're dedicating to it, the schedule that you create for yourself, the plan, the routine, like all these different pieces. But it doesn't mean you have to give it up. And I think that there's two different ways that people tend to react, is that one, giving up, or two, burning themselves out from doing too much. I cannot find the picture that I'm looking for, so I might just get rid of it for now. Because the only other option I can think of is, what you call it, going back to Canva and downloading it. And I can't do that right now, but we're good. So let's dive into it. As I'm just rambling and ranting, if you're watching me live or if you're watching like the replay of it, because I'm generally just going to keep these things up on my channel over on YouTube, like drop your questions. What questions do you have about learning languages? And especially with the topic for today, what questions do you have about learning multiple languages, making fast progress? We're going to dive into a little bit of what I think. And again, it's not planned. This is a rant, a ramble. And a lot of it is kind of what I've done in my own studies and what I do with my students and my clients. And so one of the first things I think about when it comes to trying to make fast progress, I always say in order to make progress, you have to first define what progress is and what it means. So what kind of progress are you expecting to see in your language studies, right? If someone is saying like progress to me is speaking better, what does that mean? What does it mean to speak better? What does it mean to, talk confidently with my friends? What does that mean? What does that look like? What does that sound like? Be very specific, be very clear, so that when you ask yourself, am I confidently speaking with my friends? You can say yes or no. And also, if someone else asks you, when we have conversations about like, what languages are you fluent in? And people are like, fluent or conversational fluent, because that's also fluent, or fluent reading, like definitions of fluency, you got to define for yourself as well. So I think in that same way, we have to define what progress means to us. Once you define that, then you can say, okay, if this is the progress I'm trying to make, how do I get there? And there might be the long path, right? The gradual path to get there. There might be the very quick path to get there, but it might burn you out. Then there might be like that middle ground path that is probably your like Goldilocks, your best option, depending on your time, depending on your energy. And so for me, when I think about, actually, I think it's really good for me to talk about the three languages I'm learning because they're very different than other languages. Where Italian, I do have a friend that, native speaker Italian, you might know her, Anna from Gladly Global. If you don't, check out their channel. But that language, I didn't start off having a friend who spoke the language. And similar with German, I have a friend who speaks German, but we mostly just speak in English or in Japanese. So those three languages just were on my list from middle school. I remember in middle school, I was like, I want to learn 5 languages by 25 and 10 by 30. And that's just what I did. I made the list of which languages. I've not let those languages go. One of the things that I teach my students and clients, though, is like, yes, it's great to start off your studies with whatever reason drew you to the language. It can be, oh my God, it sounds so cool. Oh my God, I love the writing system. Oh wow, the music is amazing. Oh, that drama was hilarious. I want to listen to it in the native language. Oh my God, I'm traveling soon. Like, whatever reason it is, that's a great start. But you do have to make it more personal. And for some people, it's really easy to find that personal reason. You, for example, might just like take some time to explore different things, or you're like, oh, I'll just travel there. Like, that's my personal reason. I'm going to go there in 6 months. Set the date, buy the tickets. Now you have to learn the language. But for some of us, there are languages that we're like, it's really cool. And I have some things I'd love to do, but they're not as, like required, or there's not a lot of pressure around it as there is with traveling, let's say, as an example. So for me, one of the things that I do is I gather a lot of inspiration. I have like inspiration banks. And if I find music or video or something online, or, you know, like I make a list, a database of all of these things. So anytime that I feel like I'm not making progress, or my progress isn't fast, that is one of the things that I use to measure my progress. So I go back to that inspiration bank. And let's say it's a video that I found. There's this YouTuber that I have watched before, and she's not a native Russian speaker, but she speaks Russian very well. And I'll watch her video again. I'll probably watch the same video I've watched before. Maybe I'll watch a new one because she's posting regularly. And then I'll ask myself, well, how much more do I understand now than I did before? Has it changed? I might formally write that stuff down. I might informally just think about it. And that's going to help me go, oh, okay, I guess I am making progress, because I'm not, overwhelmed listening to a 30-minute video like I was before, where I could only listen to 5 minutes. I'm actually recognizing more words now. Or, hey, I can actually shadow a complete sentence of what she's saying. So as she talks, I mirror what she's saying and how she says it. And I can actually do that with a little bit more confidence than I did before. Confidence meaning my speed and my intonation. The way I say it is very similar to the way that she says it. And that helps me to go, oh, okay, I guess there is progress. There is a lot of fast progress. How long did it take me to get there? Well, usually for me, I plan my language studies in quarters. And so it's really easy for me to tell how long it took me to get from point A to point B. So I'd say, if you're trying to make fast progress, first define what that progress is for you. You might have to take some time. It might be like a day. It might be just ongoing, where you're building that inspiration bank of things that you'd like to understand, books that you would like to read eventually, people you would like to talk to, and just write and record all those things down. And then anytime you feel like you're not making progress, do a check-in with yourself. Go back to that inspiration. Remind yourself why you're doing this. Because again, the first instinct generally is, I'm not making progress. Let me quit. No, inspiration bank is saying, here's why you shouldn't quit. Here's why you need to do it anyway. But let's rethink how you're doing this. And that's where like your plan, your schedule, your routine will impact all of that. Once you sort of redefine what progress means to you, you are very clear on that. The next thing is about being really strategic with your time, with the resource you're choosing, with the strategies that you're using. Because I think a lot of people feel like the only way to make fast progress is to study for hours. Like, the longer you study, the more progress you're going to make. And that is not true. You do not have to study for 6 hours every single day to make a lot of progress in languages. Like, you don't. Because you could spend 6 hours learning the wrong grammar, learning the definitions of the vocabulary wrong, making sentences incorrect, mistranslating words, mispronouncing a whole bunch of things. You could spend 6 hours doing all of those things, and you're no more closer to where you want to be than you were when you started, because now you're probably actually farther behind, because now you have to backtrack and fix the pronunciation mistakes that you've like solidified in your brain, and you've made connections with this vocabulary word and the meaning, and now you have to redo it and undo it so like you can remember the right word and the right meaning. So you've actually made more work for yourself than if you had just learned it the right way the first time, and you spent 6 hours doing that every day. So it's not about how much time you spend in a given sitting or across a week, but it's more, or it's not mostly about that. What is more important is what you're doing with your time, right? So if you are very clear with what progress means to you, aka I have this book that I want to read, and I'm like trying to look around for a book right now so I can just, this isn't really a reading book, but I'm just going to pull it up for context. So like you have a book and you're like, okay, this is the book that I want to read. This is a grammar book. But for for the story's sake, I want to read this book. Okay. So how are you going to get yourself to a place where you're confidently reading this book? What are you going to do? A lot of people are trying to juggle all four skills: speaking, listening, reading, writing. They're also trying to juggle grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation all at the same time. The thing that I teach all my students and clients is you should focus on maybe 2 or 3 of those max. Everything else is maintenance. Everything else is passive, or do it if you have time. So what is going to help me to read this book? Well, reading, practice, and you might even narrow it down even further, because reading is more than just reading. Reading is comprehension. Reading is recall. When you see a word, and or really it's more so recognition, I would say. So being able to look at a word and know that, oh, this is learn. Manaberu, right? That's learn. And home, that's a book. So being able to look at that and recall what it means, or recognize what it means, depending on, if it's an audio book, then you're trying to recall what it means, or maybe recognize when it's being said. Most of the time it's recognition. And so what part of reading is tripping you up? Is it that when you're reading a text, like you just don't know the words? There's just a lot of words you don't know. Then you're not just focused on reading, you're focused on reading vocabulary. And if it's this specific book, you're not learning all the vocabulary in the language. You're just learning the vocabulary related to this book. In this case, it's a grammar book, but let's say this is like a novel, like a fantasy novel, right? I actually have a couple fantasy books in other languages. And so if this is a fantasy book, what topics are coming up in this book that you need to understand, right? What are the topics? Is there magic involved? Are there like creatures involved? What are the names for these creatures? What are their powers called? Then you might just go into basics. If you're a super beginner, you got to learn the word for like people and city and to walk. But it gives you a theme for the vocab that you're learning and a focus. And then the more that you study, the more you're going to see your progress, because you're going to keep coming back to this resources tool. You're not going to be focused on speaking, because that's not your goal. You could study for 6 hours and practice pronunciation and speaking, but that's not helping you to do the thing that you expect to do. It's a waste of your time. So again, studying for hours does not necessarily mean that you're making the progress that you need to make or that you want to make. So you get really clear on what kind of progress you're trying to make. What is progress? What kind of progress are you expecting to see? Then you define like your end goal. In that process, you're kind of defining your end goal. And then you think about what strategy is going to help me to get there. What are the micro steps? Maybe you're not even ready to dive into the book yet because it is way too complicated. But you can start with practicing reading sentences and sentence mining. So maybe you find a similar topic to read online. Maybe it's like a children's fantasy book instead of this like adult fantasy that you're like, I can't even read the first sentence. You start small, you start a little bit more simple. But I think once you have that focus, then again, it's really easy to see the progress that you are hoping to see in the language that you're learning, which means that the progress is going to be faster because you're really focused. You're being really strategic with your time. Right? And what that means is that you can spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes on reading, on vocabulary, on recognition, right? And recognition often is done in either just reading lots of things, or a lot of people will often use flashcards. And you're going to see the progress because you know exactly why you're doing what you're doing. You're not opening up an app to go through lessons on Lingodeer, on Duolingo, on Memrise to learn words. And then if someone's asking you like, why are you doing that activity? I don't know. I'm trying to learn the language. But that's not like, is that helpful for you? Yes or no? I'm all about being strategic. And sometimes some of my people like to do that thinking for themselves. And some of them are like, Bront'e, I need you to help me walk, like walk me through why do I need this thing or why do I not need this thing? And we brainstorm together because I love to do that thinking. That's part of what I love to do as a language coach. And so you've defined what progress means to you, what kind of progress you're expecting to see. You've thought about the strategies, you've thought about the resources that you're choosing. And I always say, like, generally less is more. You don't need, and this is coming from someone who, like, on my phone, I have a section. I have like 4 or 5 different sections on my phone for language learning or language related apps, right? I have the dictionary section, I have the talk to people section, I have the learning section, I have the reading section. Like they're all language learning. So I get downloading lots of apps. But you don't need to have 7, 8, 9 resources you're using at one time. I think that is what's going to slow you down. But you do need more than one. A lot of people rely entirely on, let's say, Lingodeer or Duolingo for everything. And there's never going to be one single resource that does all the things for you. Some will do a lot. Some will do most of the work, like to get you there and to build that strong foundation. But you also have to do your part in practicing and using it even outside of the app. Whether it's, again, reading the things you want to read, watching the dramas with subtitles in the language or without subtitles at all, whether it's talking with friends, like there's a part that you have to do and you can't neglect that. That's why I think last week when we were live, I talked a lot about choosing study tasks. We talked about, and if you want to watch that after this, definitely it's still up on the YouTube channel. But we talked about active versus passive tasks, right? What is the difference between learning something actively and learning something passively? Knowing the difference between those two is going to help you decide, do I need to focus on active studying or passive studying? We talked about recall and recognition. Recall is being able to pull the information from your mind. Recognition is being able to see it or hear it and understand it. And again, knowing which task or which practice you need. And we talked about intensive and extensive studying. So there's the difference between intensely focusing on one thing for a longer period of time versus extensively looking across lots of things to get the gist, to get the feeling for it, and then move on. And that also can impact how quickly you're learning a language. So if you, for example, are trying to get yourself in the habit of reading, right? You feel like you're in a comfortable space. You know a lot of vocabulary. You know a lot of grammar. You would call yourself an intermediate language learner in that language, but you just don't feel ready to read yet. Maybe you don't need intensive reading because intensive reading is keeping you stuck. It is keeping you in a place where you're constantly like, up, and there's another word I don't know. And there's another word I don't know. And looky there, there's another word that I don't know. And it gets you to a level of frustration that you can't handle. You might need extensive reading instead, where you are reading the book and you're just like, okay, what was that page about? Not even like what was the chapter about? What was that page about? What was that paragraph about? Okay, let's keep going. Next study session, if you can't or you don't plan to do it in one study session. All right, read the next one. What was that mostly about? Great, perfect. Now let's do the next one. And you're not trying to overanalyze every individual word you don't know, because you're like, oh, I pretty much understood what they were talking about. They were talking about how, she just met up with her friend from college and they were just reminiscing about things they used to do in their classes. That's it. You don't need to know that they're talking about psychology and, sociology necessarily. You just know they're talking about some college class that has to do with the mind. Maybe you know part of the word if it's like a Latin root, or, if it's characters or kanji or like Hanzi. Like, you got the gist. And that's okay. you keep moving forward. The other thing that I think, and again, this is not a planned conversation. So if you're having questions come up as I'm talking, please let me know in the chat of either platform. But I think the other thing that prevents people from making the progress that they're expecting to see, like that fast progress, is because their expectations are unrealistic. I talk about this a lot as well. And the recommendation I always give, and I think I have a video up on the channel already, all about expectations. I always say set 3 levels of expectations. So your level of good, your level of best, or good, better, and best. So your level of good is your good enough. This means that if you don't have a lot of time or energy in your day, you know that this strategic action, this strategic resource, whatever you've chosen for yourself, is going to help you make enough progress to keep moving forward. It may not be like a leap forward, it may be a step forward, a couple steps forward, but it is still helping you to make progress. And then on the day where you have a little bit more time and energy, you're doing your better. So not good, but better. That's a little step forward. You might be doing more, increasing the difficulty, the challenge of it. There's lots of different ways. And I talk a little bit about it, but we dive into it in depth inside of Fluency Mastery Lab. Good, better, and then best. Best is what many people said, especially if you're like me and you're a perfectionist and you're an overachiever. We're always setting the level of best. We're like, I'm going to read a chapter a day for the next 2 weeks, or I'm going to read this whole book by the end of the week. And you've never read a book in the language that you're learning before, but you're like, I'm going to do it. And at the same time, I'm going to have 3 conversations with my friend in Spanish, and I'm setting up some tutoring sessions in French, and I'm going to watch this whole movie in Korean, and I just signed up for this new app for American Sign. Like, you set your expectations so high here, and you set that as your baseline. And then when you don't meet those expectations because life happens, because your energy is low, because you're tired, because actually something came up and you don't have as much time as you thought you would, it chips away at our confidence. It makes us feel like we are the failure, when really it's like, no, your plan just sucked. Your plan was just not great. And learning how to plan for your language studies, learning how to create a schedule that works for you and a routine that you can reliably follow is not just a natural thing that people do. It's not like you start learning a language and you're like, look at that, now I can just do all the things really well. Like, you don't just absorb skill just because you've declared that you're a language learner. Like, there's work that has to be done and learning that has to be done. And this is coming from me both as a language learner and as a teacher. So I don't like formally teach languages. I usually do that with my friends informally, but I do teach students, and I have been a teacher for years. And a lot of us aren't taught how to learn. And so we go for apps that create the curriculum for us and walk us through the step-by-step process. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. We go for teachers who, again, have the curriculum, who set the stage, who tell us, this is what we're learning next, this is the next lesson, and this is the next lesson, and you follow along. And where people get caught up and where the progress sort of slows down is that some people will rely entirely on that app, entirely on that teacher or that program, whatever it might be. And then when you're not doing the thing, you don't study, you don't practice, you don't review. So like, you show up to class, you're doing a reading together, you do some exercises, and, you know, unless they set homework for you and say, okay, by the next time, make sure you do exercise 1 and 2. If they don't tell you that, you're not going to do anything. And if you don't do anything, then you might lose what you've learned in that session. You might not continue to make progress. And we're not taught, many of us are not taught how to do that. What happens after the class? What happens around the work that you're doing with another person? And that's why I really work hard with the work that I do to help people with that process. Because when you're outside of the class, you have to decide, like, you're the one who's learning the language, you have to keep it up. And how are you going to do that? And how are you also going to do that in a way that is sustainable for you? So when I talk about consistently studying to make that progress, to use the languages you're learning, I would say consistency is way more important than speed. Because again, You can go fast in the wrong direction. You can go fast and then lose it all because you didn't maintain. But when you're consistent, when you have the routine around the languages that you're learning, that is going to sustain you on those days when you don't have energy, when you don't have the time, when you're tired, when life as it does gets in the way. And you will, once you refine that routine and that process that works for you, will make fast progress because you're not making like study process mistakes, I'll call them, because we're going to make mistakes, right? Failures happen, mistakes happen. I always say it's not about avoiding the mistake, it's about what you do when the mistake happens. But if you can master how to use your time strategically, how to replenish your energy when it's low, either just entirely focus on getting that energy back or doing things in your language studies that also replenishes your energy. If you can master how to do that, you are going to sustain the process and you are going to continue to stick to your language studies. And it's going to feel a little bit easier, sometimes even effortless at times. Like I literally just had a conversation today with two of my students because on Wednesdays we have our weekly accountability. So it's like 45 minutes. We're on a call together. We essentially turn our cameras off and we're just studying. We set our expectations. We're studying. And I listened to both people share how they're making their language learning fun. And I just had to highlight that on the call because I have one student who consistently, I've been working with her for over almost 2 years now, I think. I think it's been almost 2 years. Yeah, 2 years since we've been working together. And she is so good at highlighting or identifying the things that are fun for her for the languages that she's learning and then doing that, right? Making that her level of good, making that her default, where she's still making progress, but she's also having fun at the same time. And for many of us, it might be things like listening to music or reading poetry, or in my case, a lot of times that's playing a video game and switching the language into a language that I'm learning. And I think actually I still have some of those live streams up from when I was doing that, although it might be really laggy. And then for my other student, she like had a vision in mind for what the study session was going to be and was like focused on creating sentences in the way that I usually teach for my sentence building strategy. And then she was like, I just had so much fun playing around with like changing the pronoun here and changing the verb here and seeing how it shaped and like changed the meaning of the sentence or the nuance of the sentence. She was like, so I only made 6 sentences. I only crafted 6 sentences. And I was like, it's not only, that's 6 whole sentences. I was like, especially with languages with conjugation based on like gender or like pronouns, right? So I eat, he ate, she eats, right? Having all those different conjugations, just changing the pronoun means that you have to know how to conjugate the verb differently. It may not feel like a lot, but it is because that means that you're going to be able to communicate clearly to another person. And so I don't know. Obviously I feel very passionately about this because I like this is what I do. But I think for me, fast progress is definitely a trigger word. It's like a do you really want fast progress or do like what reasons do we want fast progress? We want to do it now, right? We're impatient. Yes, we're all impatient. I'm impatient because I've been learning Russian for a very long time, and not a long time, but maybe a little over a year or two. And Russian is probably the hardest language that I've ever learned. I don't know what it is about Russian in comparison to, and like for context, I just pulled up the stream just so I can make sure it's also working. But for context, I have 11 languages on my list right now, right? So it's not like I'm new to learning languages. Again, I've started learning languages in 2008. My list is including my native language of English, Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, Chinese, American Sign Language, Black American Sign Language, Tutnese, Russian, and then I just started German and Italian. So I'm not new to this. And the variety of languages that I've learned, with the exception of maybe like some African languages and some native languages, native meaning Native American languages, because I can't speak to those. There's a variety in the languages that I've learned. And while many people, especially if you go online, a lot of people tend to go online and are like, how long, and no shade, but how long will it take me to learn Spanish? How long will it take me to learn Japanese? No one can tell you that. Even if there's estimations, those are estimations. It is not taking into account all the factors that influence your speed of learning. Have you ever learned a language before? Have you ever learned a language in this category before, meaning a Romance language, an Asian language? Have you ever learned a new skill before at all? How much time do you have? Do you have a job, multiple jobs? Are you in school? What resources do you have access to? Like, there's so many factors that go into the progress that you make, that their number almost puts unnecessary pressure on people, because then it's like, okay, if the website says that I should take 6 months to learn Spanish, then if I have not learned Spanish in 6 months, I'm a failure. When it's like, no, have you made progress from when you started? It's either yes, like, yeah, I've made some progress, maybe not the progress I want to see. You define it. You strategically choose strategies. You strategically choose resources, right? The other option, no, I actually haven't made any progress. Okay, why? Why have you not made progress? And that's some of the conversations I have in my coaching sessions. Is like, okay, you say you haven't made progress. Why haven't you? What have you done or avoided that stopped you from making the progress you wanted to see in your language studies? Oh, well, I didn't really know what to study when I was sitting down. Okay, show me your schedule. Do you have a schedule? And if for the people who work with me, that's one of the lessons that I teach, is how to create a schedule. And I think I also have a YouTube video on that as well. But I talk about 4 different types of schedules, right? All based on time and tasks. Do you need more flexible time or rigid time? Do you need more flexible tasks or rigid tasks? So I'm like, okay, where's your schedule? If you don't have a schedule, well, that's probably why you didn't make progress, because you didn't create a schedule for yourself. Oh, you have a schedule. Let's take a look at it. Oh, it looks like everything is rigid. You said, I'm studying at 3 o'clock and I only get to do this thing. How did that feel for you? Oh, it made you feel really stressed out. That is a sign that maybe you shouldn't have a rigid schedule, rigid task, rigid time. Switch it, flip it. You are in control of what you do in your language studies. So you get to change it. You get to change it mid-week, mid-hour, mid-study session. Hey, you know what? I don't like this anymore. I want to do something different. You can do that. But I think and I say we because this is definitely how I felt, and how many of the people I work with feel. We feel like we can't change our minds, that we can't do something different or go against the grain or make a decision that is not the popular decision. And what I mean by that, one of the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that is flashcards. Flashcards is something that people feel very strongly about in our community, in our language learning community. And I have spent years off and on using flashcards in 11 different ways. What I have learned for me as a language learner is that flashcards are not a long-term strategy for me. And because flashcards are a tool, that means that there are multiple tools that you can use for the end goal. If the end goal is getting more recall and recognition practice with vocabulary or with grammar or with phrases or with sentences, because that's usually why we're using a flashcard deck, so that we can learn vocabulary and remember it. And if you're using something like Anki versus Quizlet, it's going to give it to you on a rotation, on a repetition that is like set by the system. But you don't have to use that, because that's a tool. There are other ways to do it. This one is just more automatic, a little bit more systematic, but it doesn't work for everybody, especially if you set yourself up to say, I have to use flashcards every day, because a lot of the flashcard apps have a streak. And it's like, oh, you missed Tuesday. You're like, okay, well, I might as well miss Wednesday too. And I might as well miss Thursday as well. You know, let me just not do it at all. If you set the expectation that it's not an everyday thing, it's not going to bother you. Or you set it as, this is just a short-term strategy. Like, I do use flashcards. I just use them for the short term, not for the long term. I don't set myself with the expectation that I have to use flashcards for an indefinite amount of time or for years. I just go, when I want to study flashcards, and specifically not even Anki, because I don't set those up anymore. I've done creating my own flashcards. I've done using like already made ones. One of the ones that I use is Linguist, and it's like flashcard-ish, and it's actually in sentences, which I love. I always talk about sentences, using sentences. And I'll use those as one of the tools and the resources for my studies. What is the other option I usually have? Lingodeer is usually top of the list. What else do I have? There are some websites that I use. I can't think of the exact name, but there's a website I use for Russian that teaches Russian and French. That's another resource. So I'm not entirely relying on flashcards every single day, especially when I know the goal of using them, which is recall, recognition, right? Being able to give me a word or actually put a blank and I have to type in what word is supposed to be there. That's recall. Do I remember what this word is? Recognition. It gives me the word and it says, what is this? I can do that in so many different ways. We can do that with reading. You can just read extensively or intensively on one particular thing or many things and get that exposure, because the flashcards are giving you exposure repeatedly over and over and over and over and over again. So what way can you do that in a way that works best for you? I think if you take nothing else away from this conversation, it's really just about doing what works best for you in your language studies. That is probably my biggest philosophy, value, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to the work that I do as a language coach, is I really help my people figure out what works best for you in your language studies. And that is also why I, make the content that I make, because I want to help you figure out what works best for you in your language studies, so that we are beating ourselves up less, like we are feeling less guilt and frustration about what didn't work, or I made another mistake, I'm a failure. You're going to fail. You're going to make a mistake. Like the story I tell, one of the stories I tell all the time, because I try to tell all of my mistakes in language learning so that people feel a little bit less bad about theirs. One of the ones that I made early on, it was like first year of college. So for context, I had started college learning Japanese more formally because I couldn't get a handle on it on my own. I'd come from high school learning Spanish and Mandarin and practicing Japanese and Korean on my own. And I was like, okay, my friend, who was also in my Japanese class, she's from China. She speaks Mandarin. I'm going to practice with her. And I tried to ask her if she had a cat, and I ended up asking her, does she have fur? Because I got the tone wrong. And for me, for my introverted self and my perfectionist self, that was a huge, oh my God, I'm never going to talk Mandarin ever again moment. But I laugh at it now because I'm like, it happens. Like, we're going to mess up tones. Sometimes you mess up tones and it's a silly mistake. Sometimes you mess up a tone, you say something completely inappropriate in Mandarin. And if you are someone who knows the language or is learning it, be very careful. But also laugh at the mistake and move on, because we're learners, right? I think I also talked about this last week, that a lot of people coming into learning languages feel like because we are fluent in the language that we speak, our native languages, whatever they might be, that when we're learning a new language, we're also supposed to be at a certain level of competence, right? We have to quickly pass the toddler stage and the child stage to at least sound like a teenager or like a young child before teenagehood. When no, you are diving into this video game of learning languages and you're starting from level 1 with no armor, with no weapons, with no energy, with no health potions, with nothing. You're starting from 0. You may know how the game works, but that doesn't mean that you, in this new game, in this new edition of the game, or the DLC, whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you have done this before, because this is new. You bring all that knowledge with you into this new journey of learning the language. And you're going to start from square one. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to sound like a baby. You're going to sound like a toddler. You're going to babble. You're going to mispronounce things. You're going to sometimes always have a slightly weird accent. And that's also okay. We don't need to sound like native speakers in order to be understood, to be a good language learner, right? That's a whole other conversation. And so take that pressure off of yourself. Give yourself grace of saying, I am new to this, to language learning in general. I am going to make mistakes. And if you have to repeat the thing that I say all the time, is it's not about avoiding the mistake. It's about what you do when the mistake happens. And if you can reframe that for yourself, and if you can reframe that it's not about fast progress, it's about maintaining the progress. Because again, you could do really fast progress in the wrong thing and have to undo and unlearn all those mistakes that you've learned. Like, for example, when I was learning Spanish, I'd never learned the alphabet because I learned Spanish in sixth grade from a teacher. And then when I got into seventh grade, they put me in the Spanish class not halfway through the year, but like 2 months into the year. They already studied the alphabet. So I didn't know how all the letters were pronounced, but I was like, I could do Spanish. Same thing with French. Never learned the French alphabet. Still struggling with some of the pronunciations because I have not dedicated the time to focus on it. And because, and you might have had a similar experience with a language, sometimes backtracking or restarting is boring. Like, it's boring, it's frustrating. And so one of the things that I tend to tell my students and my clients is like, don't restart, just continue where you've left off. You're going to notice the patterns either passively as you get more exposure, more practice, or actively where you are actually going to content that gives you the patterns of how to say something, gives you the patterns of grammar points and vocabulary words that are all connected and related. You get to decide how you do that. And then you get to adjust as needed. But the only way you're going to know to adjust all these things to say, is my progress as quick as it could be? Am I, taking care of my mental well-being and my energy and, the time that I have? Do I feel close to burnout? Like, the only way you're going to be able to do that is by paying really close attention to the decisions that you're making in your language studies. That's why I tell every person that I work with, make a plan, make a schedule, make a routine. And that is why I teach people how to make a plan, how to make a schedule, how to make a routine. Because if you have those things in place, then you can go, oh, it's the resource that's tripping me up or making this hard, or it's the strategy I chose. I hate that strategy. I don't like it. Every time I sit down, I want to listen to the audio. And, I'll give you a very specific example from my studies. So one of the things that I tend to procrastinate on is reading texts that are a little bit more difficult for me, because the strategy that I like to use can get frustrating really easy. And that is reading and pulling out the vocabulary that I don't know, very intensively focus on the reading. I don't always like to read extensively, except in languages that I'm more confident in. So like, I'll do that in Spanish. I'll generally do that in Japanese, in French, and in Korean. And then to a lesser extent in Mandarin and some others. But one of the barriers is like, when I come across multiple words back to back that I don't know, I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to stop. So I actually went and got, TikTok got me. And I got the translation pen. I actually have it right here. And most of the people who are getting this are people who necessarily are not trying to learn a language. As soon as I saw the pen, because I actually had a different resource I got years ago. As soon as I saw this, I was like, oh my God, I know exactly how I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this to read. And I do. Like, I find myself reading more because anytime there's a word I don't know, I scan that individual word and I can save it in here and think about it later. It tells me immediately what the word is. I can tell it. I can actually use my laddering strategy. If you've never heard me talking about laddering, it's using a non-native language to help you learn another one. So if I'm focused on Korean and I'm reading in Korean, I'll scan the word in Korean that I don't know. It's going to tell me what the Korean word means in Japanese. So I'm not even using English. And then I get to move on and I keep reading. And there's another word I don't know. Let me scan that word. Okay, it means this in Japanese. All right, I'm not confident in that Japanese word. We're going to file that for later. I save it. I keep going. It is reduce the friction between me and the reading that I want to do, which means my progress is faster because I am not getting frustrated. And I would say that's another strategy that I would recommend in this sort of informal, ranty conversation that I'm having right now, which is figure out what is causing the frustration or what is causing the slow progress if you're someone who wants to speed it up a little bit. So what is causing that slow progress, that level of frustration that you can't handle? And then how can you adjust it? How can you remedy, modify, take out, add in something that's going to help reduce that friction. And for me, it was a translation pen because now I can literally just read and scan and keep moving and keep reading. And I am not, tossing the book aside every 10 minutes because my brain is like, there's a sixth word that I know I should know this and I don't. Now I can just, quick check. Oh, I did know the word. Okay, let's keep going and read. I can listen to an audio. I actually tested it out as well on like TikTok videos or YouTube videos that I watch. And I don't have the subtitles. Well, I'll have the subtitles up in the same language, but not in my native language. And I'll just turn the pen on and be like, okay, just listen to that sentence. Like, what was that one word they said? Okay, perfect. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Or, again, having the subtitles in the language. So if it's a Korean video, the subtitles in Korean, I'll pause it. I'll go look at the subtitles. Okay, that word. I'll say the word and then it'll give it to me and I can keep moving forward. So whatever is going to help you to reduce that friction between you and getting the thing done is a thing that's going to help you speed up your progress. So I know I've ranted. I've talked about a lot of different areas of making progress, making fast progress, and really trying to see that progress in the languages that you're learning. So if you are watching this after our live stream, please just drop your comments in or your questions in the comments. Anything that you have questions about, it could be related to this video. It could be another video because either I can just say like, oh, I talked about it here, or that could be the topic, the potential topic for another live stream that we have, because my goal is to show up every Wednesday, either live like this or with a video ready for you to dive into more language learning content. But with that, I am hungry. I think we are pretty much at the end of this. So if you joined me today in this live stream, I just want to thank you very, very much. If you're on YouTube, please don't forget to like this video, just so that it helps me out on the YouTube algorithm and all that jazz, or just like it just helps me out for YouTube as I'm trying to build up my channel. And then on TikTok, if you can like tap the screen, because that definitely helps with more people finding me on TikTok. And with that, I think we're done. Yeah. But I'll see you next week again, either live or with a recording. And if you want to see me more often, then follow me in all the places that I exist, which is pretty much everywhere. All the Polyglot Fox, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, technically Twitter, although I do not use it. I'm everywhere, the Polyglot Fox. And I will see you all next time. Bye everybody. I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to say bye to the TikTok people first though. So bye everybody over on TikTok. Thank you for joining me. And with that, we are at the end of the YouTube stream as well. So thank you everybody for being there with me, and I will see you around. Bye. And it froze right at the end too. Oh no, it didn't. We're good. There we go.